Hello, I wanted to share about the last few days. I was handed a project, or it became a project at work, to create a presentation. And I just finished doing the presentation for my team. I was really resentful of this project because I saw it as unnecessary, and I felt like someone was just handing me something to do just to give me something to do. Um, and it caused a lot of stress and anxiety because this was me presenting to the team and building something out of nothing. Because of the stress that it caused, I was reminded to I don't really want to call them tools, but to engage in what I've learned when it comes to feeling into what's going on and embodying feelings. And so the last few days became this intense, almost like a retreat level, intensive experience of holding space for emotions coming up. So I would wake up, so I spent all weekend working on this presentation. So every morning that I woke up that this still wasn't done, I would wake up with anxiety and dread. And I made it a point to pause, and I'm thankful that I had the time and space for this. But instead of distracting and using that time and space to distract or say, oh, this doesn't matter, it'll be fine, or, get lost into thought, I made it a point to truly create space for these feelings and not what became sensations, to really acknowledge, not try to get them to leave, to really be with them, knowing that the more space I give in these moments, the more I can kind of transmute and clean out more barriers that keep me from feeling free and living fully. So, being in this practice for the last few days, it has brought up a lot of, it's created the space for a lot of energy coming in, embodied and through. And as this was happening, there were ups and downs, there were highs and lows of feeling a high from this, being a vessel through which energy was flowing, and the lows of the exhaustion from that, or just the actual dread while working or sitting in front of the computer and staring blankly, not knowing what to do, how to proceed. So these pits of despair and these highs, just riding that wave and acknowledging and holding space for all of it. It brought on, I was processing a lot. Things came up from my past, stories, thoughts that, with thoughts, you have to be careful. So I acknowledged them and if I went on a thought ride, then I would track back and say, oh, that happened. And sometimes I notice that it's useful because thoughts ultimately, when used well, can be part of the vehicle of how this energy moves, along with sensation. In these thoughts, some of what came up were metaphors for how I was feeling. So I would kind of come up with questions and answers um, and visuals that came up of like, what is the point of this experience if there's no point, And answers would come up like, what is the point of a burning fire? This is the fire of energy hitting and moving into a new form. And when useless thoughts or thoughts of dread or resentment would come up, they felt like I was throwing dry leaves on a fire that created smoke and unnecessary dust and a dirty fire. I thought, how can I keep this fire clean? A clean burning fire where energy is moving through and burning efficiently, effectively. With the goal to not get rid of anything, but to allow for things to be as they are without junk. Another visual that came up is a current of water, like a river, or the underwater currents that happen like in the ocean, or what bubbles up around volcanic activity underwater where there's water coming up. And I thought of the difference between a just straight current of water coming through, but sometimes it's accompanied by all these bubbles and fizzles. And there was a talk that I heard that I might link in the description where thoughts were compared to bubbles. They just arise out of nowhere, and if you don't grab onto them and give them weight, they just go. They come through, and so it's okay not to take them seriously, but to see them as something to accompany an experience, sensation. And the more uncomfortable you are, the more they try to give context and save you for this, like how to. It was so interesting to navigate. That thoughts would throw me a line of like, hey, you don't have to feel this. You can just get on this thought train, and to acknowledge them and say, it's okay. I'm choosing not to escape this feeling. I'm going to stay with this sensation. So it was interesting to respectfully acknowledge thoughts and to not let them take over. But the thoughts, like this morning, something from my past came up when it came to human interaction. So a lot of the anxiety is just, it was interesting to do that inquiry also of what am I truly afraid of, and where does this visceral fear come from? And answering those kinds of questions of like, okay, there's a dread, there is I want to be part of a community because that's how I stay safe. And I come off as awkward, or if I'm wasting these people's time with a presentation that, if I do this wrong, I'll be dismissed as irrelevant, or I want people, like, why is it, or people just being amazed by, like, looking at all things that are both, like, whether they're petty, because they're part of me. Childhood fears, adult fears. I happen to all of those things. So because interact, and I found my thoughts, my mind kind of resolving that interaction in real time. And it's so interesting to notice the way that time So how I now in this context I thought as feel, it was interesting to see how the senses were melding all together, where the thought gate about the resolution of that, and it was interesting for that story to tell itself and for me to experience it on a sense level. And it was part of resolve, it was part of the evolution of how I was experiencing the stress of this looming presentation. How the senses melded is went to turn down a noise machine that me and my daughter use for sleep. And with this kind of intense attention, moment to everything. And I mean, with every step, I felt a change in my body, a change that was interacting with the sound. So it's like shh, like with every change, I felt a quieting of in the sensations in my body, and I used that as a vehicle, yet another vehicle to move energy and embody my experience. I left a peripheral part of the grass. More and more, I don't like to destroy things that are growing unless I really need to. So, or unless there's a reason. So I left the periphery and I saw that there's all this mowed grass, and around it was grass that is now like 5 feet tall and blooming with little seedlings. And I took a moment to like grasslings, I guess. And we had kind of a conversation. Like we mow the lawn all the time, and we think that it becomes normal that grass is a few inches tall. That's what grass is. And the normal thing to do when it's growing is to mow it down and to always keep it short. And I kind of compared it to what we do to our emotions, what we do to our experiences, where like the stress of this presentation, I could have handled, in the past I would have handled without applying all the engagement. I could have handled this differently, where I would push down the stress and the anxiety and belittle it as, well, this is just silly. I need to just not worry about it, just get over it, just get this presentation done. And instead, I felt into every single step and every flare and every anxiety and breathed into it and gave it space. So that grass that had bloomed with these shapes that I haven't seen on grass in a while, unless you go into a wild field, and you don't really register it as grass necessarily. What the grass was telling me is and to develop into what it's actually meant to be. And if you respect and honor the nature of every kind of thing and every kind of reality that comes up, it can become something that you would never expect it to become. Because when someone says grass, I don't think of a 5-foot blooming grove. And so I felt like that's what I was doing with my inner sensations, because it has been quite an evolution to watch pangs of anxiety and feeling, borderline nauseous in the morning, or just by allowing those feelings to be there just as they are and giving them a full acknowledgement, they have bloomed and they have grown through things. The old words to describe this would be through positives and negatives, good days and bad days. But they went through all these phases, all this energy keeping on, coming in, being embodied and moving and becoming something else. And now I'm in this state of, I'd had highs and ecstatic moments. I've had lows, and I've had a more centered, zooming in and zooming out of where I'm at. Feeling sensations all around and outside of me, feeling a specific sensation in a very specific place, and then removing it from having to be in space anywhere. All this stuff. So it's so interesting to see now where my body and sensation and thought and sound and visual. I would take walks and stuff and have a visual experience as part of this also, and social interactions and all this. Being in such a, operating on that level of intensity for multiple days in a row, it's not something I would ever ask for. And if my boss asked me again, hey, that was a great presentation, you want to do another one? I would not be like, oh yeah, that was a great, thinking that was a great experience. This is not something I would have asked for. But it's interesting to see how these moments of difficulty can be the transcendent retreat situation if you choose, kind of like Mission Impossible. It can be a mission if you choose to accept it. So it's been an adventure. This little chapter is now over because the presentation is done and it went very well. And I made it a point to not over practice it. I practiced it yesterday, and then today I was tempted to perfect, and I was like, no. The most useful thing I can do is to keep feeling into my body, because practicing being now, that's the practice for the presentation, of being here now, instead of being anxious about how's this coming off and how am I sounding, and I hope that they, not doing this objectification thing of, I hope how I'm showing up is okay, but to feel into my body and to truly respect this moment exactly and in its fullness as it is. So that's what I did leading up to the presentation, making it a point to not over practice. I thought, this is, a lot of performers know this. You don't, like the day before and on the day, you let it go. You trust all the prep that you did, and then you put it down. And stay as true to yourself as possible. So this has been a great lesson. Sometimes when I'm in a good state and I feel present, I think to myself, I wonder how I would fare in a difficult situation or if I was in pain. So this is one of those moments where another talk that I was listening to, he said, when God wants to punish you, he answers your prayers. So this was one of these answered prayers where I was given this opportunity of how I would fare in a difficult situation, where the physical pain and the anxiety pain was all there. And it showed me how everything that I've learned in engaging with all of this as it shows up, moment to moment, how it can look. And during that time, I also had these self-aggrandizing moments of like, oh wow, I'm doing so great. And I recorded another talk that I'm not making public because it was just random ADD ranting. And after I did that, and it caused me to have a bad day, I was reminded of like, I am not a teacher. I am not yet I don't get to claim this and be like, look at me go, I'm amazing. Like, it's not useful to track this and be like, oh, it's, all these smart, cool things that are coming up. To grab them as, oh, look how well I'm doing, becomes part of the useless thoughts that aren't helpful. So now that I'm having this focused day, I wanted to record this as a way of kind of a video journal, and to mark this and to share without trying to share all of my amazing smartness, because that was the error with which I recorded yesterday's video, which is unlisted. So I felt like I'm in a more authentic space today. So if as I approach any other difficult moments in my life, this will be it's useful to know that I handled this way. And when you're doing it in the moment, when I was doing it in the moment, there is no promise that it's all going to work out. It's in every moment. The only goal is to hold space for exactly what's showing up in that moment as directly as I can muster. That's all. The surprise that comes from that, the blooming of how this energy moves, that comes from that, I could talk about it, but it can't be anticipated, because during the bad days, it all truly feels hopeless. And then you have to dip into that hopelessness and be right there with it without telling it to change. Sometimes I do comfort the nervous system and say, it's okay, it's going to be okay. But when it comes to directly holding space for something, I know the most useful thing is to let it be there without maybe comforting, but not setting any ultimatums that it needs to leave. And it was interesting to notice that the feeling of anxiety was very similar to the feeling of elation or anticipation for something positive. The sensation in the body was very similar. And so it was interesting to see how ascribing a label to something, how it was useful to remove the label real quick and just to be with the sensation. And to notice that it doesn't have to be negative. It's just energy that's hitting because of something that is not in my control, that I have to like field, and it's just coming. And I saw that suppressing things or controlling things or distracting from it, that energy that's flowing through can get stuck, and just like when a river stagnates and it can start getting kind of gross. I can see how if you don't allow the full space for energy to move, energy that's out of your control, whether it's coming or going, it can stagnate in ways that are unhealthy, and it gunks. It can gunk in your system. So this was a great reminder that holding space for everything to come through keeps a clean flow, and it never stops, just like the waves of the ocean never stop. So whenever I feel this outcry of please stop, when will it stop, or like when will it be enough, I remember the ocean, where you stand and the next wave comes, and it comes, and there's no way for you to tell the waves in which order to come, in which size. They're coming, and it's up to me to be there for it. So thank you for listening. It's been quite an experience, and I wish for me to hold this lesson and to keep on being in the present moment, even when things aren't intense, because it's always beautiful. It's always moving into something new and something beautiful.